we're going to tell a little bit about drones and about the ethics and the morals involved with developing them and actually using them. So I brought one of my company's drones. We develop rowbirds. They're not your very typical drones because they fly like real birds. There's not a hidden propeller or anything. They use their wings. For me, it started with, and this is very interesting, a quote in the diary of Wilbur Wright, which was basically the first bird strike ever recorded, the first collision between a bird and an aircraft. And hopefully all of you know that the first motorized flight was in 1903, and already in 1905 he collided with a bird. As a company, we're a spin-off of the University of Twente and also got support from NWO through the STW funds. So let's get then to how it looks like, and this is the first one, there's many to follow. So basically, as I said, we build predators and we actually use them to chase away birds from airports. So where drones can also cause problems at airports, we fix the problems with birds. And that's actually, there's about 8 billion euros in damages to aircraft worldwide caused by birds per year. So that's us chasing starlings. A lot of fun to do. So if you want to have a fun job flying this around, come to me. Gonna skip over that one. And there's a lot of stuff that drones can do for good. And this is another thing that we do. We do a lot with drones and nature. So for instance, we use infrared cameras to find these little fawns, so you can remove them from the fields and mowing machines don't actually kill them. But let's get to the more ethical questions. And the first one is actually a picture of ours. When we want to operate at an airport, we've got to deal with so many stakeholders. We've got the pilots of the aircraft, we've got the airlines themselves, we've got the airport, the air traffic controllers, environmental groups, farmers in the surroundings, we've got insurance companies, everything. All of them we need to convince that what we do is safe and has an added value to the airport. Now, most of them understand this, but it also differs per country, per culture. For instance, in Germany, we are allowed to fly these things at airports, and in the Netherlands, we are not. And you might ask yourselves, why not? And we're not sure. But one of the things that we do know is that this is happening. This is a picture taken in 1880, if I'm not mistaken, but it's about a law in the UK that came into effect in 1865. This law prescribed that once a motorized vehicle entered a town or a city, someone had to walk in front of it waving a flag. This law has been in effect in the UK for 25 years. 25 years it took before they took away this law. And that meant that innovation in the automotive industry was brought to a halt for 25 years because people were afraid of new things. And that's also what's happening now. Drones can be used for so many things, for good and for bad. Yes, that's true. Technology is not inherently good or bad. It's what a person chooses to do with it. As an example, this is a living beetle with a little chip on its head that makes you control it. You can actually control the living beetle. According to every definition by law, this thing is a drone. I'm not going to say it's good or bad. I'm only going to say it's possible. You can actually place a camera on there. Cameras are small enough nowadays to actually do that. And you could have one flying around here without anyone noticing. Just as an example. Other example, right top, suicides on the railway tracks. A suicide by train has costs to society of about 3 million euros per incident. Next to, of course, the traumatizing experience to the machinist, etc. Drones could help there. Inspections, parcel delivery, anything. And then you get to the question, can you put a bomb in it? Yes, you could. But the question, and it's always one of the first things that actually people ask us about the birds. Could you put a bomb in it? And I said, what use would it be to actually do that? I could create a bomb, put it in my shoe that blows this building away. Why would I want to do it with a drone? But also then, going to military drones, you know, the ones that they actually control from the desert in Nevada that drop bombs in the Middle East, they figured out through research that those people, the impact of them actually doing that is just as high as people, pilots actually being in an aircraft. So apparently we don't see it as a simulation anymore. We see this as real life. And this has been highly underestimated by the military and also by the medical world. Privacy. These little kids peeking through a wall. Now these little kids can just fly a drone over your garden where you are maybe sunbathing naked. Some people like to do so. They can see that. What happens to that imagery? More of a neural network. We're going to work towards a system, and it's actually a system of systems. Everything is going to be connected. I mean, your computer is already connected to your phone, to your tablet, to nowadays even to your car. And we're going to add drones to that. And that is actually necessary because all things in the air need to be able to see each other. They need to know where they are. What happens if a system like that fails? How much data are we actually gathering here? Then they took our jobs. Even the Minister of Social Affairs of the Netherlands said robots are taking your jobs away, which is, on the one hand, you can understand this. On the other hand, I mean, it's not so long ago that we actually had jobs of people lighting lanterns in the street. Nowadays, we have electricity. So jobs change. And then we go further, by the way, with this neural network idea. Eventually, all this stuff will become autonomous. A person in the loop is no longer needed. But who then is actually responsible for the system? Is it the manufacturer? Is it the developer? Is it the service provider? I don't know. What if the system fails? Or what if part of the system fails that is feeding information to my system, causing my system to fail? Who is responsible for that? I have no idea. And what we also see is sometimes something like this. This is actually Rear Admiral Grace Hooper. She was the first programmer to write a compiling program for a computer language. Great woman. And this is a quote that was also used by Chris Anderson from 3D Robotics. He said, what they do, they build consumer drones. And what he said, if were I to ask permission to the government to actually sell these drones on the consumer market, nobody would have had a successful company. He said what we did is we just sold 500,000 drones in the US alone, and we forced the government to get their heads out of the sand and start thinking about how this is going to integrate into the airspace. He said, I'm not going to ask for permission, I'm just going to ask for forgiveness. And where the FAA, the Federal Aviation Authorities in the US, first just said, no, drones are forbidden, and that's it. He started selling 500,000 of them, and he forced them to start thinking about how this should integrate in the airspace and in our daily lives in general. And now I'm going to give it to Peter Paul.
Actually, the things Nico just told you, I think, were the reason for us to start working together in a project, MVR project, on the ethics of using, designing all these types of artifacts. Because you see, the designers, they have their social intentions, they want to contribute to a better society. They also encounter all kinds of issues in legislation, forms, rules that there are, and they try to find their way. So we tried to contribute to that. So let me take it into a wider context. So most people think about drones on the street, you could say, as all kinds of military drones, like the one you see here with the camera on front, or they can kill and bomb people. But of course, there are many more issues now in society going on. They take our jobs, as we just heard. There are safety and security issues, and they might come back with your cat, for instance. And some people also have really high expectations that we might not even need somebody like Black Pete anymore to give us all our gifts for St. Nicholas. But I think the biggest fears are actually for drones combined with artificial intelligence. So what would happen if we would have weapons that make autonomous choices about killing people or not? Illustrated by this picture. So those things were the background for us to start thinking about how to deal with all those values and ethical issues that are implicitly or explicitly at stake. ethical but also legal issues. How could we deal with this? How could we help designers and users to integrate that in their work into their everyday practices? And we thought that this question, should we do it or should we not do it, would not be the best question. They are there and we need to learn to live with them, to design them in a better way, to use them in a more responsible way. So the goal of the project then is to develop a tool for the responsible design and use of all those technologies based upon a framework, a legal and an ethical framework. So there will be 2 lines in the whole MVI project, which is then also, of course, based on theory, on a broad interpretation of the idea of precaution in law and in ethics. Also on ideas about how to bring ethics into design, how to design ethics into the artifacts, as it were. And that's what we try to do. So this is the team. I will not go into detail about that. Just tell you a bit how we build it up. So this links actually quite nicely to the opening speech we had from Jeroen. And there are 3 layers that we want to explore in the project. Descriptive layer, how can we analyze the impact of such technologies on society? The normative one, which values, rules, norms are at stake? And then design, how can we then integrate those valuations of those impacts into the design and use of artifacts? The whole idea is then that we should develop a specific approach to those technologies. And it's always about unmanned aircrafts. And of course what we want to do is to bring the humans back in. They should not be unmanned anymore. Often we think about drones as some forms of replacements of humans. Instead of the environmental inspector, a drone starts to inspect nature. Instead of a soldier, a drone is killing people. Instead of the postman, a drone is giving you your parcels. So what we try to do is to move beyond that and to understand a drone as a mediator of all those things. Drones mediate how we get our parcels, how we inspect nature, how we deal with fire, how we deal with warfare. And that gives a different framework, a different approach to understand and also to design drones. So then typically you see a drone as, well, a means to act on a distance, to perceive on a distance, which influences all kinds of social processes, social structures. And it also means that maybe the autonomous versions of it, a drone choosing who to kill, as it were, could even also be seen as a mediator of warfare, of how we do and see and understand war. So it tries to build then upon that idea of mediation. A drone should not be seen as an alternative to the humans, but as a mediator between humans and the world around us. But they change how we act, how we perceive the world. So you can study in more detail then what a drone is doing. To perceive at a distance how an operator sees an observed person. How a drone is observing, for instance, some kind of a crowd of people that are having some kind of a political demonstration. And how then to decide when to make a report to the police. There are actually many drones doing this kind of stuff. And that's where you can identify the values and what's at stake. The asymmetry of being observed and not knowing who is observing you. But also the character of the public space that we are living in, where you cannot know anymore how, you can say, anonymous, private you are there. Well, we also saw the idea of acting on a distance. An operator who can kill somebody on a distance, or who can see a fire on a distance and act on that. And that's indeed the interesting thing that Nico also just said. That in warfare, you see that also here, it's not a drone killing somebody else, and there seems to be nothing at stake. It's actually a mediator of the killing. People who are doing this suffer maybe even more than the soldiers doing it for real, as it were, because they are doing it for real, they experience it for real, they look people in the eye before they kill them, and they have severe disorders after that. So this framework of mediation can help to understand the roles of such artifacts in society, and then also to bring them into design. Where there is this methodology, value-sensitive design. The idea is that you identify values at stake and you try to materialize them, as it were, into the design. The problem of that approach, we feel, is that it has a too static idea of those values. It ignores the impact that the technologies themselves have on the values that are at stake. That we might develop different ideas about, well, the ethics of warfare or the concept of privacy when we introduce such new technologies in our society. So how can we take that into account? How can we see ethics as a form of experimenting with such things and building this in a responsible way into drones? So that's what the tool is all about that we want to make. A tool that helps designers, users to anticipate the impact of the drones, to evaluate them in a systematic way and to somehow feed that back into the design of drones, but also into the rules that we have well, to deal with them. so that we can make this world maybe in the end a better place. Thank you.